respond to a big challenge? If a big challenge comes into your life, how do you respond? Do you try and run away from it? Try and hide from it? Or do you run toward it and try to embrace that big challenge? People have different responses to big challenges that come into their lives. Well, Nehemiah had a big challenge. And his challenge was the revitalization of Jerusalem, a process that had been occurring but now continues to occur. That word is not found in the book of Nehemiah. Revitalization is it's a word that we use in today's language. But what Nehemiah, the book, and the man in that time period was all about was really revitalization, as we use the word today. Nehemiah had a project. He wanted to continue building Jerusalem. And now he's on his way. We pick up our story at Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 9. Nehemiah, at risk to his life, at risk to his job, has asked the king, King Artaxerxes, the most powerful man of the most powerful nation at that time, permission to leave from the position as his personal servant, cupbearer, to go to Jerusalem for the purpose of building the walls in Jerusalem. Nehemiah has this project, revitalization of Jerusalem. And the king said yes. So now Nehemiah is on his way. And he arrives in Jerusalem after over 1,000 kilometers on horseback in a very hot country. Nehemiah finally arrives, and he delivers his letters to the governors of that land. Well, Nehemiah has come as the governor of Judah, and he's come to Jerusalem as the governor of Judah. He has come with a project in mind, the revitalization of Jerusalem. I want you to imagine what it would have been like for Nehemiah to be riding into Jerusalem at that time. He's going through a gate that's broken down and burnt. He's going past walls that are broken down. What do you think he's feeling at that time? Well, with that description, you might be feeling desperation, discouragement. I don't think Nehemiah is. Because Nehemiah has gone out of his way to rush to this challenge, to embrace this challenge. And he goes through this gate into Jerusalem. What I imagine is that his heart starts to beat just a little bit more, because he's here now. And what I imagine is that as he sees these walls and sees the gates, there's a smile forming on his face, because he's up for the challenge and he has arrived. This was Nehemiah's dream. It was his longing to be in Jerusalem leading this project, and now he's here. You know what it's like to have a longing like that? A longing, and then have that longing realized? Well, it's like being a student. Many of you have had that experience. And you come to your graduation day finally, after all of that work. You're at your graduation day. Or it's like going from being single to engaged to now you finally arrive at your wedding day. A longing fulfilled. It's like after all that time dreaming and planning and filling out paperwork, you finally arrive in Canada. And it's like that time when you filled out more paperwork and you finally come to the point where you're being received as a Canadian citizen. Many of you have had that experience. A longing fulfilled. That's where Nehemiah was at as he rode into Jerusalem that day. It was a longing fulfilled. He had arrived in Jerusalem. But there were storm clouds on the horizon. Isn't it amazing how so often when you're just having a really good day or things are really going well, that you see storm clouds on the horizon? You're a student, you get to that day of your graduation, but you don't know what to say to everybody who says, "What will you do now?" Or you get to your wedding day, but you've really got a bad case of the jitters, and the great speech you thought you would give at the reception, you can't even remember what it was, and you lost your paper in one of your pockets, and you don't know what to do? Or you did all that planning to finally get here to Canada, but when you arrive, you need to get yourself installed, you need to find a job, or it's the day that you're going to be received into citizenship. And you're going down to the immigration office. It's a wonderful day, but the traffic is particularly heavy. The Champlain Bridge is backed up so badly, and you get there, and there's almost no parking. You ever notice, like, even on your good days, sometimes there's a but? Well, that was certainly the case for Nehemiah. There was a big but. We read the English Standard Version in chapter 2, verse 10. It starts with but. I know the New International Version doesn't, but if you look at verse 9 and verse 10, you can imagine the but there. And this is what it says. Nehemiah 2, verse 10. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant heard this, it displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. You notice that? But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant heard this, it displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. Imagine that someone would dare to come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. These guys are really upset. They are very upset that someone would come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel in Jerusalem and in Judah. Well, what's wrong with these guys? I mean, what's up? Who are these guys? Well, Sanballat is the governor of Samaria. And he says he comes from Horon, like Horonite, so it sounds like he was probably born somewhere close to Jerusalem, but he's the governor of Samaria. You need to understand a little bit of backstory on Samaria. At one time, there was a kingdom, north and south, that was together under King David. But it wasn't long, 2 generations later, the kingdom divided. You have the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And the northern kingdom was taken over by the Assyrians. Earlier than the southern kingdom was taken over by the Babylonians. And the Assyrians had this policy of depopulation. So they would take all the people from here and spread them around the Assyrian Empire so they couldn't all get together and rebel. That was a pretty crafty technique, actually. It worked well. So that meant the people from the northern kingdom, not all of them, but most of them were spread around the Assyrian Empire, and then other peoples that were conquered were brought into what was Israel, was the northern kingdom. And so you have all these different peoples coming together, including some who were Israelites. And what do you have? Everybody is a mixed breed. Everybody is a mixed breed. Even at the time of Jesus, the Samaritans were despised by the Jews because they were mixed breed. And then you have Tobiah. Well, Tobiah actually is a Jewish name, but it says he's an Ammonite. And so he's the governor of that area that was Ammon. And so when Nehemiah came and gave his letters from the king, including that letter that would give him a huge expense account, he gave those letters to Sanballat and Tobiah, the governors of that region. Then we read on a little later that they have another friend called Geshem who is from Arabia. He's an Arab. So what we have here is we have all the traditional enemies of the Israelites. We have the Samaritans in the north, we have the Ammonites in the east, and we have the Arabs in the south, and pushing them up against the Mediterranean Sea in the west. And someone would dare come to help out the people of Israel. They're really upset. So you mix in Ezra, the Jew, and you get bad blood. But now I wonder, that's history, right? I wonder if there isn't something else that's going on here. I mean, what's up with these guys? They are really upset with the arrival of Nehemiah. I mean, what's going on with them? Is there something more that's going on with them? Nehemiah gave them the letters. The letter said clearly that he was there, he would be the governor, had the expense account, and what his project was, to build the walls of Jerusalem. Now, the walls are really important. You might remember earlier on in chapter 1, the report that came to Nehemiah was that the walls were broken down and how that negatively impacted the people of Jerusalem. So what's up with the walls? Now, we don't have walls around Greenfield Park. No, I'm happy with that. I mean, I don't feel any problems with having walls around Greenfield Park or Brossard. I mean, do you have a problem with that? No, I should think not. In fact, if there was a wall around Greenfield Park, I'd really start to worry. When I think of a walled city, I think of the old city in Quebec. If you haven't been there, you must go. You can go to the old city, and you can see the original walls. Some have been repaired. You can see the walls around the old city. You can drive through the gate. You can walk through the gate. You can enter the old city, Quebec City. And it's a very interesting place to be. Now, why would our forefathers in this area spend all that time and all that money to put walls around this city? They're high walls, and you can't climb up them. Why would they spend all that time and all that money? Why spend all that time and all that money to put walls around Jerusalem? Toronto doesn't have walls. Vancouver doesn't have walls. Montreal doesn't have walls. What is the point of walls? Because walls have a point. Here's the point. When these walls are built, it will make Jerusalem stronger. It will make Jerusalem the center, a strong center for all of Judah, which is all the territory that the Jews now have. It strengthens Jerusalem. It strengthens Judah. And the stronger they get, the more control that Jerusalem has over its area. Guess who's losing control? Sanballat in the north, Tobiah in the east, and Geshem in the south. This is an issue of control. And these guys are losing control in the face of Nehemiah's revitalization project. Control is the issue. And that's what the walls represent to them. While when a church engages in revitalization, control is always an issue. Because there are people who don't want it. There are people who think, well, church is fine just the way it is now. Thank you very much. What are we doing this for? We don't want this. And sometimes they'll verbalize those. They'll say words to speak against a revitalization project. Sometimes you're just passive-aggressive, like they just don't get involved in any way. Do you feel like you're losing control of your church? When I stand up here and talk about revitalization, do you feel like you're losing control of your church? You know, as Nehemiah arrives in Jerusalem, the question is, who will rise to the challenge to help Nehemiah build the walls? And to modernize that for our question, who will rise to the challenge to build this church, the ministry of this church, so that we continue to be a growing and changing church? Because growth and change go together. You know, this is a body. You know that, of course. And there are many other growth metaphors used in the New Testament for the church. And growing things grow and change. Growing things change. And if they're not growing and changing, they're dying. That's the reality of life. So who will rise to the challenge of seeing the ministry of this church being built, of seeing us continue to grow and to change? Well, Nehemiah arrives in Jerusalem. He takes 3 days, it says, to rest. Now, it's been a long trip, but as we read the rest of the book of Nehemiah, we see he's a man of prayer, and I suspect he's spending a lot of time praying during these 3 days. And then after 3 days, Nehemiah comes up with a strategy, and maybe he had it before, but this is his strategy for the revitalization of Jerusalem. Verse 12. Chapter 2. Then I rose in the night. This is Nehemiah. I and a few men with me. This is his strategy. He has a small group. He has a revitalization team. Last week I talked about the fact that Greenfield Park has a revitalization team. Just a smaller group of people that got together to think about ways of reaffirming the identity of Greenfield Park in the face of the larger agglomerate of Longueuil. Well, this is Nehemiah's strategy. He puts together this small team, his revitalization team. And with that team, he goes out to inspect the work. What needs to be done? What needs to be built up? Now, in the story of Nehemiah, he goes out at night. He takes one horse. They don't all ride horses. Just one horse, I guess, so they don't make as much noise leaving the city. And they come to the point where they need to leave the horse behind because the rubble is so great they have to climb over the rubble. And they do it at night. It all adds to the mystery of the story of Nehemiah's story. Nehemiah put together a revitalization team. You know, I think we're at that point as a congregation where a revitalization team can come together, a smaller group of people, just to look at what needs to be done for the ministry here to continue to grow and continue to be effective. Those walls that were being built in Jerusalem meant Jerusalem had more influence in that area. And we want to have influence as the Church of Jesus Christ, influence for Jesus. Influence in our community. And a small group of people, as a revitalization team, can help us move along that way. Just the way that Nehemiah's small group of people made a huge difference. Now, you know, someone has to be saying, but like, aren't we doing okay? Like, haven't a lot of good things been happening in our church? Absolutely. You know, a lot of good things have happened in Jerusalem. The temple had been built. It took 20 years because of opposition, but the temple had been built. And 12 years before Nehemiah arrived, there was a great revival. The temple had started up again in terms of worship services at the temple. Great revival among the people. We read about that in the book of Ezra. And now Nehemiah has arrived. It's not that good things hadn't happened. It's just there was more work to be done. This summer, we saw the baptism of 3 young women. What a beautiful day that was. That was a day of joy for me. A day of joy for us. We've had celebrations this summer. On July 8th, Sunday, July 8th, Susan and I celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary. We had no family close by at that time. You're our family, and you celebrated with us. Thank you. We love you as a congregation. That was wonderful. Thank you. We celebrated on Friendship Sunday. There are people who are considering joining our church now in an official way as part of the committed fellowship. There are really good things happening in our church. But there's more to happen here. And like Nehemiah had that small group, we can have a small group, a revitalization team that can focus on looking at what's going on here. What are we doing well? What needs to be improved? Even what we're doing well can be strengthened. How do we strengthen that? And then bring those results back to us as a congregation. You know, we're not alone in this. There's a man, Andrew Corral, who came and did a session with us last January. 18 of us were there. We enjoyed the morning. It was a beginning. And he said to me at that time, the next step is a revitalization team, and it hasn't happened at this point. But we have someone who will work with us. That revitalization team is not alone. We as a church are not alone. Andrew is gifted in doing this, and he's helping other churches in our area move along this same path of revitalization. I think that a team like this would be best if there are men and women. If there are people who've been here for a while and people who have just arrived. This year, maybe last year. There are people from different backgrounds because we all come from different backgrounds, and so that the composition of this group ideally would reflect the wonderful diversity that we have as a congregation. Now my hope is that, and my prayer has been, as I've been preparing this week, is that God the Holy Spirit will be speaking to you. And that there are people listening to me right now, that there'll be something stirring in your heart that says, you know what, I think I might like to be a part of that. My hope is that there'll be a number of people who will respond and say, Pastor Brian, if you need me, I'm willing to be a part of that team. And then having a larger group of people, I can look at that and say, okay, let's get a representation of our congregation. And let's put a team together. Let's move ahead. But who is going to help to build this church to see us continue to grow and change? But you know, that revitalization team was not enough for Nehemiah. You see, Nehemiah needed to take those results, he and I suppose the team might have been people he brought with him, or I would think it would include people that were there who knew the walls and the state of the walls and show them how to move around at night. But that's not the end of it. See, Nehemiah has to take another step now. And that step is he has to call together the people. And so he calls together the people, the Jews of Jerusalem, the leaders and the Jews. He calls them together, all of them, because he wants to present to them his project, his revitalization project, his project to continue to build Jerusalem. A project started under Zerubbabel, but still there's more building to be done. And so he calls all these people together. And this is a critical point in this story. This is a test of Nehemiah's leadership. He's going to present this to them. He's going to tell them what needs to be done. He's going to tell them the project he has in his heart. This is a test of Nehemiah's leadership. What are the people going to say? Well, I mean, things have been going along okay without these walls around the city. There seems to be a sort of peace in the area of some sort, and this is really going to disturb things. So what are the people going to say to Nehemiah when he brings this out to them? Wow, let's take a look at verse 17. Chapter 2, verse 17. Then I, Nehemiah, said to them, "You see the trouble we are in. How Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer suffer derision." And I told them of the hand of God that had been upon me for good, and also the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, and this is critical, this is a test of Nehemiah's leadership. And they said, "Let us rise up and build." So they strengthened their hands for the good work. That means they got to work. So they say to Nehemiah, "Yes, let's do that. Let's go ahead with this project." And then, look what happens as you move to chapter 3. Chapter 3 is all about all of the people who are involved. Let me read 2 verses. Then Eliashib, chapter 3, verse 1. Then Eliashib the high priest rose up with his brothers the priests, and they built the sheep gate. They consecrated it and set its doors. They consecrated it as far as the Tower of the 100, as far as the Tower of Hananel, and next to him the men of Jericho built. And next to them Zechar the son of Imri built, and on and on and on and on and on. 40 leaders with people following them built 45 sections of wall and repaired 10 gates. Nehemiah could not do that job himself. Even Nehemiah and his revitalization team could not do that job. It required everyone on board. So who will take up the challenge to build the ministry of this church so we see ourselves continuing to grow and to change? All the people of Greenfield Park Baptist Church will take up this challenge, or it won't happen. All the people of Greenfield Park Baptist Church will take up this challenge, or it won't happen. A revitalization team wasn't enough for Nehemiah. It's not enough for us. It's not enough to say, "Oh, that little group of people, they can just take care of it." Nope. Everybody. It's like this. All hands on deck. That's the expression. That means everybody gets involved, in whatever your level is. And we have different abilities sometimes dependent on the age that we are. But it's all hands on deck. It's everybody involved if it's going to go forward. And we start with a revitalization team. I'm hoping that you'll talk to me about that. I'm hoping that you'll phone me. I'm hoping that you'll send me an email and say, "You know, Pastor Brian, if you need me, I'm willing to do that." But the reality is, it is all hands on deck. If we as a church are going to continue to grow in ministry and in influence in this place to continue to grow and change, it's every one of us that has to be involved. All hands on deck. Let's pray. Father God, we acknowledge this is the church of Jesus Christ. We want to serve him. We want to glorify him. We want to be his church, his hands, his feet, his body here in this place at this time. Guide us as we move forward. In Jesus' name. Amen. The elders come forward. We're having communion together.